There are various ways of representing geography in a GIS. What we are doing when we are taking what's in the real world and putting it in GIS, we're using a data model to represent that geography. And we can do this in a number of different ways. We've been working a bit with features, points, lines, and polygons. And that's considered vector data because it's discrete data that has actual locations on a map. We've also worked with aerial photos and digital elevation models, and this is considered raster data, or data that's based on pixels. So a first thing to be cognizant of is that we have these two different ways of representing the real world in a GIS through points, lines, and polygons, and through raster data, which is data that's based on a matrix of cells or pixels. In terms of vector data, we're going to focus on that a bit for this particular video, and we're going to talk about the various ways that points, lines, and polygons have been represented in a GIS. The data model for representing vector data has changed through time, and this is important to know about because as we start finding and downloading data, you might see GIS data in any of these formats, and it's useful to know what you're looking at so that you know what you're getting. So what a data model is, it's a structure for organizing geospatial data so that it can be easily stored and retrieved. It's essentially a framework that's used to represent the geography in a computerized environment. And the one thing that's interesting about vector data and why GIS is so powerful is because you have that ability to link geographic data or coordinates to a database or that attribute table. And if you remember, if something's selected on the map, it's also selected in the table and vice versa. So that relationship between geography and the database allows us to do a lot of different things, like ask our data our map questions, or make maps based on the various data that's in that attribute table. So we are using Esri products in this class, and Esri really is the company that most individuals use and most organizations use for a GIS. So we're going to talk about the data models from the Esri perspective so that, again, you know what it is that you're dealing with. So a little bit of a history lesson about the data model. When Esri first came on the scene, their product was called ArcInfo, and it was based on a coverage data model, and it was highly complex, and it's something that you couldn't really work with within a Windows environment very easily. Like copying and pasting data from just one folder to another was a very dubious process. So it wasn't something that was that you should be doing within the Windows environment, is moving the data around. And ArcInfo was based on AML, which essentially meant that at this time GIS was done mostly by individuals who could program, who could write AMLs. So GIS wasn't necessarily for everyone because you needed to have that level of knowledge. In 1994, Esri recognized this and came up with a product that simplified GIS and made it GUI-based, basically click and point kinds of an interface. And it simplified the data model, and it made it a shapefile model. And this is really what we've been working with up until this point, is our shapefiles. And I'll show you what they look like because they don't look like other files that you have probably worked with in the past. In 2000, Esri recognized that it needed to once again shift because the complaint about ArcView, while it was great and easy to use, it didn't have the robustness and power of ArcInfo. So they essentially combine those two products together to create ArcGIS, and that's what we're using now. It began at version 8, and we are now at version 10.4, and the data model changed to the geodatabase model, which meant that it was now based on a relational database, which again just gave more power in modeling geographic information. So why do I mention this? I mention this because you are going to see all of this at some point in time. The two types that you're going to see the most are going to be the shapefile data model and the geodatabase model. When we start downloading data, most everything that you're going to be getting is in a shapefile model. So it's why I mention it, and I'm going to show you what each of these looks like within ArcGIS. So going to our catalog, one thing to mention that ArcGIS is actually three integrated components. It's ArcMap, it's ArcToolbox, and it's Catalog. So we can get Toolbox here, and we can access Catalog here. Catalog is the data management utility for ArcGIS. So this is where we can manage our data. We can move things between folders, we can copy paste, we can create data here. Everything that having to do with data creation and management really should be done within Catalog. And you can see all my folders that I have here for GIS data. I'm going to expand the Pennsylvania GIS data folder, and one thing you're going to notice is that you see a number of different data sets here and a number of different icons, and I think it's important to understand what these icons mean. If we look at the green icons, notice that you see a bunch of green ones, you see some gray ones. The green means that it's the shapefile data model. And then further, the icon tells you if it's a point line or a polygon. So if we look at all of these here, we can see that icon is for a polygon. If we look down here under cities, we can see that this is a point shapefile because the icon is points. And then if we look down here under roads, we can see that we have a line there, which means that it's a line shapefile. So just by the color, we know that it's a shapefile. And also it doesn't hurt that it says SHP accurate, which is again indicative of a shapefile. So then if we scroll up here, we see this container-like object. This is a geodatabase, and it has a container, and then if you expand it out, you're going to have featured data sets and feature classes within it, and also some tables that can be used to set up relations with the features that we have. So what I always think of this as is that the featured data set, like what you see here, boundaries, I think of that as the same concept as a folder. And then within that folder, you have feature classes, and going back to the old data model, I think of that as just shapefiles. So there's a lot of similarity between them. Now, I have house districts here in my geodatabase. I also have them down here. If I would, as a shapefile, if I would add both of these to the map, they would look no different than one another, even though one's a feature class and one's a shapefile. It's just that they're using a different data model. Now, something I want to show you about shapefiles that I think is very important to know, because this can be one of the first frustrations you experience with GIS. Notice when we are looking in catalog, we see one file associated with the municipalities here. If we look at that same data within Windows Explorer, notice that the same data has 7 or 8 different files associated with it. And we see the SHP, like we saw in catalog, but we also see the PRJ, SBN, and so forth. These are the other components to a shapefile, because the shapefile isn't just the SHP. The PRJ gives its coordinate system information, the DBF is the attribute table, and the SHX and others are the geometry data. So let's say that you wanted to share your municipality shapefile with a colleague in another township. If you just sent this SHP via email, the person that gets it would try to add it to ArcGIS, and they would get an error message saying that the data is corrupt and it doesn't work. And the reason why is because you have to send all of these to the person that you're sharing it with, and you do it by just compressing them into a zip file and sending that zip file to your colleague. So just be aware of that, because you don't within Windows, you see every file. In Catalog, it hides it, so like if you want to copy and paste this to another folder, it will automatically take that PRJ, DBF, and so forth with it, so that you don't have to copy those. In addition, if you would copy and paste this to another folder, you would have to make sure that you got all of these along with it. So that just gives you a little bit of an overview of shapefiles versus geodatabases and so forth, just so you have an idea of what they look like within Catalog, and just to know that when you're working with shapefiles, it is really more than one file that's part of a shapefile, and if you're going to be sharing this data and moving it or doing any kind of management with it, you've got to be very careful in how you work with that shapefile.